Welcome to MarTech Heads, the radio show that helps tech marketers stay ahead of the game. Hosted by Jeff Sheehan and Sarah Torville.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm so excited to be here this afternoon with Sarah Torville at the Flip My Funnel event. What an event it's been so far today. Just
Fantastic.
Spectacular. And we're really so excited to have our guest this afternoon, Jill Rowley, who is someone I've been following for years now, I believe, on Twitter and engaging with her on LinkedIn, what have you. And certainly someone who's quite the preeminent individual on social selling. And as a matter of fact, she just gave a presentation on social selling, which is very informative, and the audience enjoyed very, very much. So without further ado, Sarah, you want to take it from here?
Yeah, well, the Queen of Social Selling. I love your title. So, Jill, please share with us. I mean, you're at the Flip My Funnel event, and you've just done a great presentation. Maybe you can just summarize a little bit about what you shared with the audience today.
Sure, I'd be happy to. So a little bit about my background, just to give some context. 20-plus year career. I started in consulting, and then I was an individual quota-carrying sales professional for 13 years. So I was at Salesforce.com and Eloqua. And for the decade that I was at Eloqua, my buyer was marketing. But I was a sales professional selling into marketing. The Flip My Funnel conference is all about sales and marketing, and how do we better align, and how do we flip my funnel. So today I talked about the social selling aspect, where buyers are digitally driven, socially connected, they're mobile with multiple devices, buyers are empowered, they have access to information and people like they've never had before. So what I'm trying to help sales organizations understand is that they have to be where their buyers are. And if their buyers are in social, they need to be in social, at least from a discovering information about their buyers so that they can be more relevant to their buyers.
You talked about, when you were talking recently on stage today, about using social media as a means for listening initially. And I love that. And I think a lot of people jump straight in and think they've got to start having a conversation. Explain more a little bit about how you think it's an important tool for listening and why.
Yeah, it really is listen, share, engage. And it's listening to understand the context, the tone, the environment that particular social network has, the etiquette, if you will, to listen to, if you're going to use Twitter and you're going to try to engage with a specific individual on Twitter, look at their tweet history. Do they actually engage? Do they respond? Do they reply? It's why I don't really follow a lot of brands anymore on Twitter, any logos, because I'm on Twitter to engage. Yeah. I'm on there to learn, to listen, to share, to engage. And if you go out and you just start putting stuff out there, promoting, and not really understanding the tone and the context, then it's going to be a social fail.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I mean, I'm certainly one who engages on Twitter as much as I possibly can. It's been very beneficial in creating a lot of relationships that I take over to LinkedIn, to email, to phone calls, and then subsequently to face-to-face meetings. I know you're doing that quite well, Jill, yourself. So.
Yeah, social's really just an additional channel. It's an additional channel for communication. It's an additional channel for research. Social selling is not a panacea. It doesn't replace phone or email or face-to-face. It's an additional channel, an additional place.
What about the tonality? I mean, I think, again, some mindsets might just think, well, you can speak the same as you might on Twitter, as you might on Facebook, as you might on LinkedIn. But, and in the world that we live in at Media Frenzy, we say that actually there's an art to how you write. And you've got to get that tonality right. Do you agree with that?
I absolutely agree. And the tonality is different on the various networks.
Yeah.
And even if we talk about Facebook, which I don't really cover Facebook very much because I'm usually working with large B2B enterprise organizations. And sometimes what I'll do is I'll say, Facebook, you can actually go on and do a little bit of research, but you don't want to be creepy. You don't want to be talking about that person's kids and their trip to the amusement park when you're getting to know them, that can actually go too far.
That's true.
Twitter's more conversational. It's shorter bits of information. It doesn't have to be like totally comma here, end everything in a sentence with a period. You can have more like soundbite type conversation on Twitter. LinkedIn really is a place for business. And I see people go into LinkedIn and start sharing things that really aren't in the context of business, and I think that's a miss. So that tone and the context is really important in the network.
Yeah, I agree with you. And the other thing, you talk about Facebook, one of the problems I see now is people are using it more and more as an advertising channel of their respective businesses, and it gets to be obnoxious. And you want to block these people and disengage with them, quite honest with you, because the fact that I think a lot of people, particularly, they work LinkedIn, they work Twitter, and Instagram, and some of the other channels, and then when they go over to Facebook, they want the personal side, how people connect with their families and friends. People that are out there scuba diving in some various Caribbean places and enjoying themselves, or riding horses. People having a good time, and that's what you want to see, and not really about commercials and advertising or taking their narcissistic behaviors to the nth degree.
So I'll actually make a point about that. For 20 plus years, I've worked for companies and I've sold products. And about 16 months ago, I decided to launch my own company. And I didn't have any real thinking that I would build a big organization with lots of employees. I was pretty focused on doing professional speaking, being hired by organizations to come in and speak at conferences. Right. And it was tough for me because I went from being part of a company, working with customers, helping them really solve their business problems, to being the product. And I actually noticed that on Facebook, I became too self-promotional. I was sharing too much content about me, Jill Rowley, and the speaking engagements that I had just had, and the content that I had just created and written. And I realized that's not what people want on Facebook.
Correct.
And so I made a conscious effort to go back to sharing more about my kids and my husband, and just funny off-the-wall things that I think about, not just all business on Facebook, because that's really not what people want on Facebook.
I agree. But what about the mindset and the behavior change needed in a lot of organizations where the sales team they're not from the social world? How do you strategize with clients and help them to understand how to bridge that gap?
Yeah, the culture of being social has to be within the organization. You can't have a top-down hierarchical command and control culture and then go tell your salespeople to be social. That's a conflict. So the environment has to be one where they encourage individuals to share their voices, to share their perspectives, to contribute, to somewhat represent the brand. And this is tough because marketing has worked so hard for so long to
protect the brand,
protect the brand, control the brand, protect the message, control the message, and letting go. In particular, in PR, I see PR struggles quite a bit. So you have to have that agreement that we hire the right people and we trust them to be responsible, to represent us in a positive professional manner. But culture, it really is mindset, culture of being open and transparent and collaborative and engaged.
Yeah. What about the theory, and something we've run across recently with some clients is, there's a lot of social sellings happening. Social engagement is happening. Discussions are happening with prospects. And then it gets to the point where you need to pass that off to the actual sales expert. And I find that very interesting because sometimes what happens is that sales expert picks up the telephone and wants to speak to that person, but all of the engagement beforehand's been on Twitter, for example. Can you go and have that Twitter engagement and then suddenly have a phone call? How do you, should that salesperson be actually starting to also use the same platforms and nurture that relationship through the channel where it's been nurtured from previously?
Yeah, I think that handoff is difficult, and it's not in the best interest of the buyer. And I understand organizationally why sales teams are structured that way. I understand that the inside virtual digital sales rep is a less expensive resource within the organization, and they want to have their field, their hunters, which I hate the language. I hate that we talk about our buyers in the we're going to go hunt and we're going to go farm.
Yeah, I know. It's so very
still hearing that?
aggressive. And,
I'm
I hear it.
still
Yes, I hear
hearing
it.
it quite a bit. And I even don't even like the word prospect. Who wants to be prospected? I have eliminated the word. That's why you hear me say buyer a lot, because I think about prospects, buyers as future advocates.
Yeah.
My goal throughout the entire relationship is to ultimately have them be the buyer be an advocate of my product or service, my company, of me. And so in that handoff from one person to another, one, if you don't have the history of that interaction, and the field rep goes in without having the context, you're going to piss off the customer.
Yeah.
And that's not what you want. So there has to be work done to either have a better handoff, have that history in the CRM system, and a requirement to review it.
Yeah.
Or I think we're seeing people understand that they want to get in earlier, that they want to be the one to initiate the relationship to earn that trust.
Yeah. Yeah.
So where do you see things going? I certainly talked about in the panel discussion where things are going with regard to social selling and the whole entire process.
Yeah, we are early days. I mean, we are seriously in the early days of maturity, if you will. I think one of the big challenges is that sales leaders, it's not linear. Like if I make 100 calls, I either get through or I don't. But if you send 100 tweets, it isn't as easy to measure. I think we are going to see more. We're going to see a lot of tools come into the space. We're going to see a lot of companies, the bright shiny object, and thinking that there's another tool to help. I think what we'll see is and we'll step back and we'll think about the roles and responsibilities within organizations and who's the right champion of a social selling initiative. We'll look at aligning it to the business strategy, to the sales and marketing strategy, and we'll start to embed it into planning and realize that it's not a tool. A fool with a tool is still a fool, and that we'll think about this more from like we think about other technologies like CRM or marketing automation. We'll think about the people, the processes, the skills, the training, and all of those things.
It's like you alluded to earlier when we were talking. It's no panacea. A lousy salesperson in real life is going to be a lousy salesperson in social selling.
Come on, say it. If you suck offline, you'll suck more online.
You said it, I didn't
it's
say it.
because it's written down. It's I mean, it's even worse.
It's going to amplify.
Yeah.
It's going to amplify good behavior, and it's going to amplify bad behavior. So #don't suck.
Yeah. No, you need the training. These people have to be trained, whether it's Xerox professional selling skills. There's some comparable programs out there about how to sell because it's still part of the overall process.
That's exactly it's part of the process. It needs to be embedded.
Yeah, absolutely.
It needs to be really part of the cadence. It needs to become part of the daily routine. It needs to be habitual, right? And that comes through training, from coaching, from tracking, from measuring, reinforcement, celebrating success. This is a real, you almost have to run a marketing campaign internally to drive transformation within the organization.
So let's imagine a large enterprise, thousands and thousands of employees. And maybe the answer is dependent on the company. But do you think that every employee should be socially savvy? How do you determine who should have a social voice and who shouldn't?
Well, first and foremost, it starts with, are the customers social? Mm-hmm. Are they present in social networks? Because it's about being where your customers are, mm-hmm. being visible to your customers, being relevant to your customers. So if you are still in an industry or a geography where the buyer really hasn't gone digital or social, don't start there.
Yeah.
But if the customer is digital and social, mm-hmm. then I would say that not every rep needs to be socially savvy, but certainly socially aware, mm-hmm. and present. Mm-hmm. And so I would assess the maturity. One of the organization, is the organization social from a
Correct.
Culture perspective? Yeah. Two, is the marketing organization socially visible, present, doing it well? Mm-hmm. Three, of the sales organization, assess where they are. Mm-hmm. So do you have some social selling superstars who have just gone out and done this because they knew they needed to do it and they've been successful? So I would start with assess, audit where the organization and where the individuals are. Mm-hmm. Then I would configure the strategy, the program, the tactics, and then I would evangelize, educate, and enable the organization.
Well, I hate to cut it short, Jill, but really, this marathon session has come to an end. You already ran one marathon today, okay, with your speech, which was great, and now we've subjected you to another one, and but the pain point is ending right now, okay? Yeah. But Sarah and I really appreciate you being on the show today and talking about social selling, the queen of social selling.
It's been a real pleasure.
Jill Rowley, real pleasure.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.